The funny thing about honesty is that nobody notices it until it costs them something. That was the thought running through my head the morning I found the ring. It was barely 6:30, and the Sterling estate was already awake. The gardeners were trimming hedges that looked more expensive than my car. The kitchen staff were preparing breakfast for people who would probably leave half of it untouched. And I was carrying a basket of fresh towels through the East Wing, trying not to spill coffee on my uniform. At 25, I had learned that invisible people survived by staying quiet. In a house the size of a luxury hotel, filled with executives, socialites, and people whose watches cost more than my yearly salary, nobody paid attention to the maid. Nobody remembered my name. To them, I was simply the girl who cleaned rooms and disappeared before dinner. The morning sunlight poured through the massive windows, painting golden rectangles across the marble floor. I was crossing the hallway outside the family library when something caught my eye. A small flash of silver beneath a console table. At first, I thought it was a coin. I almost kept walking. Then I noticed the diamond. My heart skipped. I crouched down and picked it up carefully. The ring was stunning. Platinum. Vintage craftsmanship. The center diamond alone had to be several carats. Even someone like me, who knew nothing about jewelry, could tell it was worth a fortune. For a moment, I just stared at it. The stone sparkled in the sunlight like a tiny star. My rent was 3 weeks overdue. My car needed repairs. The medical bills for my foster mother were sitting unopened on my kitchen counter because I couldn't bear to look at them again. One ring like this could change everything. I turned it over in my hand. Inside the band was an engraving. Sterling Family Legacy. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just jewelry. It belonged to them. I slipped the ring into my pocket and continued toward the main office. 30 minutes later, I stood outside the study where the estate manager worked. Mr. Collins barely looked up when I entered. "What is it, Charlotte?" he asked. I placed the ring on his desk. His eyes widened immediately. "Where did you get this?" "I found it in the East Wing hallway." He grabbed it so fast you'd think I was about to run away with it. "Do you realize what this is?" I nodded. "A family ring. It's been missing since last night." He examined it carefully before letting out a long breath of relief. "The family has been searching everywhere." For one foolish second, I thought he might smile. Maybe thank me. Maybe say something kind. Instead, he tucked the ring into his jacket pocket and returned to reading emails. "You can go." That was it. No gratitude. No appreciation. Not even a thank you. Just dismissal. I forced a polite smile and left the office. By lunchtime, the entire estate knew the ring had been recovered. The staff whispered about it in the kitchen. Security guards discussed it near the front entrance. Members of the Sterling family laughed about the scare during lunch. Nobody mentioned the person who found it. Nobody mentioned me. I should have been used to that. But somehow it still hurt. I was carrying a tray of tea through the garden terrace later that afternoon when I noticed someone watching me. A tall man stood near the fountain. Dark navy suit. Broad shoulders. Calm expression. Ethan Sterling. The billionaire himself. His eyes followed me for a moment longer than necessary. Then he glanced toward the study window. Toward the office where the ring had been returned. And for the first time since I started working at the estate, Ethan Sterling looked at me as though he actually saw me. By 7 that evening, the Sterling estate no longer looked like a home. It looked like a kingdom preparing for a royal coronation. Luxury cars rolled through the front gates one after another. Valets hurried across the circular driveway. Crystal chandeliers glowed behind towering windows. Everywhere I looked, people were rushing to make perfection appear effortless. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala was one of the biggest social events in New York. Politicians came. Celebrities came. Billionaires came. And people like me worked quietly in the background, making sure none of them noticed how much effort it took to create elegance. I stood in front of a mirror inside the service corridor, adjusting the sleeves of my black uniform. The fabric was simple. Clean. Practical. Nothing like the designer gowns arriving through the front entrance. A housekeeper beside me sighed. "Do you ever wonder what it feels like?" she asked. "What?" "To walk through the front door instead of the back." I smiled. Not really. It was only half true. Sometimes I wondered. Not because I wanted their money, but because I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen. The ballroom looked breathtaking by the time guests arrived. Fresh white roses decorated every table. A live orchestra played softly beneath the golden ceiling. Waiters carried silver trays through crowds worth billions of dollars. I spent the first 2 hours serving drinks and collecting empty glasses. Most guests never looked directly at me. Some handed me glasses without speaking. Others talked around me as if I were furniture. I had grown used to it. Still, there were moments that stung. Around 9 o'clock, I was passing through a group of women near the grand staircase when one of them stopped me. She could not have been older than 30. Diamond earrings sparkled beneath perfectly styled blonde hair. "You," she said, snapping her fingers. "Bring another bottle of champagne." I nodded politely. "Of course, ma'am." As I turned to leave, I heard her friend laugh. "Can you imagine spending your whole life serving other people?" Another woman joined in. "Some people are simply born for different roles." Their laughter followed me across the room. I kept walking. There was no point reacting. But every word landed heavier than I wanted to admit. Later, while replacing floral arrangements near the head table, I overheard another conversation. Two businessmen were discussing Ethan Sterling. "The man could marry anyone," one said. "Movie stars. Royalty. Anyone." The other nodded. "That is what happens when you have that kind of money." I focused on my work. Conversations like that belonged to a different universe. Ethan Sterling existed in magazines and financial headlines. I existed in employee records and weekly schedules. Our worlds only crossed because I dusted the same hallways he walked through. The orchestra shifted into a new song. More guests arrived. Cameras flashed. Laughter filled the room. Then something unexpected happened. As I stepped aside to allow a group of donors through, I looked across the ballroom and found Ethan watching me again. Not casually. Not accidentally. Directly. His expression was unreadable. Calm. Focused. Almost curious. For a second, everything around me faded into background noise. Then a beautiful woman appeared beside him and slipped her arm through his. Tall. Elegant. Confident. The kind of woman who belonged in this world. She followed his gaze until her eyes landed on me. Her smile disappeared instantly. And for reasons I could not explain, a chill ran down my spine. The woman beside Ethan Sterling was exactly what people expected a billionaire to choose. Everything about her looked effortless. The designer gown. The flawless smile. The confidence that came from never questioning whether she belonged in a room. I lowered my eyes and returned to work. Whatever that look had meant, it was none of my business. 20 minutes later, I was arranging dessert plates near the ballroom entrance when Mr. Collins appeared at my side. "Charlotte, Miss Victoria needs assistance in the Rose Lounge." His voice carried the same detached professionalism as always. "Right away." I picked up a tray and followed the signs toward the private lounge reserved for VIP guests. The room was quieter than the ballroom. Softer lighting. Expensive artwork. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate gardens. Victoria Sterling was standing near the fireplace when I entered. Up close, she was even more striking. Tall, elegant, perfectly composed. The engagement ring on her finger probably cost more than every paycheck I had earned in my life combined. "You are Charlotte, correct?" she asked. I nodded. Yes, ma'am. Her smile never quite reached her eyes. I have heard about you. That surprised me. People like Victoria did not usually hear about people like me. I am not sure what you mean. She stepped closer. The ring. My stomach tightened. I only returned something that belonged to the family. Of course. Her voice was sweet. Almost too sweet. That is what everyone keeps saying. The silence stretched between us. Something felt wrong. Not openly hostile. Worse. Controlled. Calculated. May I get you anything, ma'am? I asked. Actually, yes. She glanced toward a table across the room. Bring me the champagne. I moved immediately. The bottle was already chilling in a silver bucket. I carried it carefully and began pouring. You know, Victoria said casually, some people become confused when they spend too much time around wealth. I froze for half a second before continuing. I do not understand. They start imagining opportunities that do not exist. She accepted the glass and studied me over the rim. They mistake kindness for interest. The meaning landed immediately. Heat rushed into my face. Not because she was right. Because she thought she needed to say it at all. I assure you, ma'am, I understand my position. Good. Her smile returned. Then we understand each other. I wanted to leave. More than anything, I wanted to walk out of that room and disappear into the safety of my routine. Instead, I stood politely, waiting for further instructions. Victoria turned toward the window. You seem intelligent, Charlotte. Thank you. That can be dangerous in the wrong environment. Before I could respond, the lounge door opened. Ethan walked in. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Victoria's expression softened. Ethan's eyes moved between us. Everything all right? He asked. Perfectly, Victoria replied. Charlotte was just leaving. I lowered my head respectfully. Have a wonderful evening. As I passed Ethan, I expected him to continue his conversation and forget I existed. Instead, his voice stopped me. Charlotte. I turned. Yes, sir? For a moment, he seemed about to say something important. Then he glanced at Victoria. Whatever thought had crossed his mind disappeared. Nothing, he said quietly. Enjoy the rest of your shift. I nodded and walked away. But as I stepped back into the crowded ballroom, one question refused to leave me. If I was truly invisible, why did everyone suddenly seem so concerned about where Ethan Sterling was looking? The gala finally ended a little after midnight. The last guests drifted toward waiting cars, their laughter fading into the cool spring air. Inside the estate, the orchestra was gone, the champagne glasses had been cleared away, and the magic of the evening was already beginning to disappear. That was always my favorite part. When the performance ended. When the people stopped pretending. I carried a stack of empty serving trays through the west corridor and headed toward the service elevator. My feet ached. My shoulders felt heavy. But there was still work to do before anyone could go home. The mansion never truly slept. It only changed shifts. By 1 a.m, most of the staff had gathered in the kitchen finishing cleanup. The atmosphere was lighter now. Ties had been loosened. Jackets removed. Someone turned on a small radio near the coffee station. For the first time all day, people sounded human again. I was wiping down a stainless steel counter when Mr. Collins entered carrying a folder. Conversations immediately stopped. That usually meant trouble. He adjusted his glasses and scanned the room. Before everyone leaves, there is one matter to address. Nobody moved. The family wishes to express appreciation for the recovery of a valuable heirloom this morning. Several employees glanced toward me. My stomach tightened. Mr. Collins opened the folder. As a gesture of gratitude, the Sterling Foundation will be making a charitable donation in honor of the employee who located the missing ring. A charitable donation. Not to the employee. In honor of the employee. I should not have been disappointed. Yet somehow I was. That is all, he said. The meeting ended. People returned to work. A few coworkers offered sympathetic smiles. Others simply shrugged. Life moved on. 20 minutes later, I stepped outside through the employee entrance. The night air felt cool against my skin. The estate grounds stretched silently beneath moonlight. Fountains shimmered in the distance. The gardens looked almost unreal. I sat on a stone bench near the side courtyard for a moment before driving home. Sometimes I needed a few minutes of quiet before facing reality again. My phone buzzed. A message from the nursing home. My foster mother had another difficult day. Memory loss. Confusion. They recommended additional care. Additional care meant additional expenses. I closed my eyes. For a few seconds, exhaustion settled over me like a weight. Long night? A voice asked. I nearly jumped. Ethan stood a few feet away beneath the courtyard lights. No security. No assistance. No crowd of important people surrounding him. Just Ethan. A little, I admitted. He glanced at the phone in my hand. Bad news? Nothing I cannot handle. His expression suggested he knew that answer was not entirely true. Silence settled between us. Comfortable. Unexpected. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the bench beside me. A small velvet box. My eyes widened. What is this? Open it. Carefully, I lifted the lid. Inside sat a delicate silver bracelet. Elegant. Beautiful. Far more expensive than anything I owned. I immediately shook my head. I cannot accept this. Why not? Because I returned something that was not mine. That does not deserve a reward. Ethan studied me for several seconds. The faintest smile touched his face. That is exactly why it does. For a moment, I simply stared at the bracelet. The silver caught the moonlight, sending tiny reflections across the polished wood of the bench. It was beautiful. Elegant without being flashy. The kind of gift chosen carefully rather than purchased thoughtlessly. That somehow made it even harder to accept. I closed the box and handed it back to Ethan. I appreciate the gesture, but I cannot take it. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Most people would not refuse. Most people are probably smarter than I am. That earned the smallest laugh from him. It was the first time I had ever heard Ethan Sterling laugh. Not the polite smile he gave photographers. Not the practiced expression from business interviews. A real laugh. Brief. Genuine. Somehow it made him seem less distant. Charlotte, he said, you found something valuable. You returned it without hesitation. That matters. It should not be unusual. Unfortunately, it is. I looked away toward the gardens. Somewhere beyond the estate walls, New York was still awake. Sirens in the distance. Traffic moving through streets that never truly rested. My life existed out there. Small apartment. Overdue bills. Long workdays. Responsibilities waiting for me tomorrow morning. This conversation felt strangely disconnected from reality. You are different from what I expected, Ethan said. What exactly did you expect? He thought for a moment. I am not sure. Before I could answer, his phone rang. The screen lit up with Victoria's name. Something changed in his expression immediately. Not discomfort. Not annoyance. Obligation. He silenced the call. Then it rang again. You should answer, I said. He glanced at the screen before slipping the phone back into his pocket. It can wait. I did not understand why that response bothered me. Perhaps because people like Victoria belonged in his world. People like me did not. The longer this conversation continued, the more complicated everything felt. I stood from the bench. I should go. Ethan rose as well. Charlotte. I paused. Keep the bracelet. I shook my head. No, why? I smiled softly. Because if I accept it, I will spend the next 6 months worrying about losing it. For a second, he looked surprised. Then he laughed again. This time a little longer. Fair point. I turned and began walking toward the employee parking lot. Halfway there, I looked back. Ethan was still standing near the courtyard fountain, watching me leave. The next morning, reality returned with perfect efficiency. Laundry schedules. Cleaning assignments. Endless lists of tasks waiting to be completed. Whatever unusual connection had existed the night before felt impossible under bright daylight. By noon, I had almost convinced myself I imagined it. Then I arrived at the nursing home after my shift ended. Mrs. Harper sat near the window in her favorite chair. Her silver hair glowed beneath the afternoon sun. Some days she remembered me immediately. Some days she did not. Today she smiled when she saw me. Charlotte, she said. Relief washed through me. Hi, Mom. She was not my biological mother. She had been my foster mother since I was 11 years old. The woman who taught me kindness. The woman who worked double shifts for years so I could have opportunities she never had. Now she struggled to remember entire years of her life. I sat beside her and held her hand while she told me stories I had already heard 100 times. I never interrupted. Every memory felt precious now. An hour later, a nurse approached quietly. Charlotte, there is someone asking for you in the lobby. Confused, I walked toward the front entrance. The moment I stepped inside, I stopped. Ethan Sterling was standing beside the reception desk holding a bouquet of white roses. For several seconds, I genuinely thought I was imagining him. The lobby of the nursing home was the last place I expected to see Ethan Sterling. The building smelled faintly of coffee and fresh laundry. A television played quietly in the corner. 2 elderly residents sat near the reception desk working on a puzzle. Nothing about this place belonged to his world. Yet there he was, standing beneath fluorescent lights in a tailored charcoal coat, holding a bouquet of white roses as if he had been here 100 times before. What are you doing here? I asked before I could stop myself. Ethan looked almost amused. Good afternoon to you too. I glanced around nervously. The receptionist was openly staring. So were several residents. How did you find me? The estate keeps emergency contact information for employees. That sounds slightly concerning. Fair criticism. Despite myself, I smiled. Ethan extended the flowers toward me. These are for Mrs. Harper. I blinked. Not for me? You refused the bracelet. I accepted the bouquet, shaking my head. You really do not like being told no, do you? Not particularly. The honesty made me laugh. For a moment, the tension disappeared. Then Ethan's gaze shifted toward the hallway leading to the resident rooms. May I meet her? The question caught me off guard. Most people avoided nursing homes whenever possible. They promised to visit elderly relatives and then found reasons not to. They claimed they were busy. Life happened. Responsibilities piled up. Weeks became months. Ethan was one of the busiest people in New York. Yet somehow he was standing here asking permission to spend time with someone he had never met. You do not have to do this, I said quietly. I know. His answer was immediate. That was what convinced me. 15 minutes later, we sat together in Mrs. Harper's room. Afternoon sunlight filtered through lace curtains. The white roses rested in a glass vase beside the window. Mrs. Harper studied Ethan carefully from her chair. You are too handsome to be a politician, she announced. I nearly choked trying not to laugh. Ethan looked startled before recovering. I will take that as a compliment. Good, she said. Politicians make me nervous. The next half hour passed more easily than I expected. Ethan listened while she told stories about raising foster children. He asked questions. Real questions. The kind that required attention. Not once did he glance at his phone. Not once did he act impatient. Watching him, I felt something shift. At the estate, Ethan always seemed larger than life. Billionaire. Executive. Public figure. Here he was simply a man sitting beside an elderly woman, listening to stories because he knew they mattered to her. When visiting hours ended, we walked toward the parking lot together. The evening sky glowed orange above the city. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For making her happy today. Ethan looked ahead for a moment before answering. My grandmother spent her final years in a place like this. The admission surprised me. I did not know that. Most people do not. We reached my aging sedan parked near the curb. Beside it sat a sleek black luxury car worth more than my apartment building. The contrast would have been funny if it were not so ridiculous. Ethan stopped beside my car. Charlotte, there is something I need to ask you. His tone had changed completely. Serious. Focused. Whatever came next was important. And somehow, before he even spoke, I knew my life was about to become far more complicated. My hand tightened around my car keys. What is it? Ethan looked unusually hesitant. That alone was enough to make me nervous. Men like Ethan Sterling negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. Hesitation did not seem like part of his personality. I need your opinion on something, he said. I stared at him. My opinion? Yes. You have an entire company full of experts. I am aware. And somehow you ended up in a nursing home parking lot asking a housekeeper for advice. A faint smile appeared. When you say it like that, it sounds strange. Because it is strange. To my surprise, Ethan laughed. Then his expression became serious again. He reached into his jacket and removed a thin folder. One of our foundation projects is under review. He handed it to me. A senior care initiative. I opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. The proposal described a luxury residential facility with premium amenities, private suites, gourmet dining, and high-end wellness programs. Everything looked impressive. Expensive. Polished. Yet something felt wrong. You want honesty? I asked. Always. I looked up. This was designed by people who have never spent time with elderly residents. Ethan crossed his arms. Explain. I pointed toward the nursing home building behind us. Most people here do not care about marble floors. Then I pointed to another section. They do not care about imported furniture either. Ethan listened carefully. What do they care about? Feeling remembered. The evening breeze moved through the parking lot. Somewhere nearby, birds settled into the trees as daylight faded. Most families visit less than they promise, I continued. Most residents spend more time feeling lonely than uncomfortable. I tapped the proposal. This project is beautiful. But it feels like it was designed to impress donors instead of helping people. For several seconds, Ethan said nothing. His eyes moved between me and the folder. Interesting. You disagree? Actually, I think you just explained why the board cannot agree on the project. He closed the folder slowly. 3 months of meetings. Hundreds of pages of reports. Nobody said it that clearly. I felt suddenly self-conscious. It is only my opinion. No, Ethan shook his head. It is perspective. The word lingered between us. Perspective. Not expertise. Not status. Not credentials. Perspective. For reasons I could not explain, hearing him say that mattered more than it should have. We stood there talking for another 20 minutes. About the foundation. About Mrs. Harper. About life inside the estate. The conversation flowed so naturally that I almost forgot who he was. Then headlights swept across the parking lot. A silver luxury sedan pulled to the curb. The passenger door opened. Victoria stepped out. Even from 50 feet away, I could feel the temperature drop. Her eyes landed on Ethan first. Then on me. Then on the folder in his hands. Her expression remained perfectly composed. Perfectly polite. Which somehow felt worse. Ethan noticed her immediately. The easy atmosphere vanished. I should go, he said quietly. I nodded. Good night. He hesitated before walking toward Victoria. She greeted him with a smile. But as she turned toward me, something cold flashed behind her eyes. A warning. A promise. Or perhaps both. Then she slipped her hand through Ethan's arm and guided him toward the waiting car. I watched the vehicle disappear into traffic before climbing into my own aging sedan. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed. A new email notification appeared on the screen. Sender, Sterling Holdings Executive Office. Subject line, confidential meeting request. My heart stopped for a second. I had absolutely no idea why the Billionaire's corporate office wanted to meet with me. I barely slept that night. The email remained open on my phone long after midnight, as if staring at it long enough might explain why it existed. Sterling Holdings Executive Office. Confidential meeting request. The message was brief. Professional. No details. Just a time, a location, and a request for my presence the following afternoon. By 7 the next morning, I was back at the estate making beds, polishing fixtures, and trying unsuccessfully to stop thinking about it. Every possible explanation seemed ridiculous. I was a housekeeper. I did not belong in executive meetings. Yet the invitation remained real. Around noon, Mr. Collins approached me near the library. Charlotte, you have permission to leave early today. I blinked. Excuse me? Transportation has been arranged. Before I could ask another question, he handed me a visitor badge and walked away. Transportation. Visitor badge. The entire situation felt increasingly unreal. At 2 o'clock, a company driver dropped me in front of Sterling Holdings headquarters in Manhattan. The building stretched into the clouds. Glass. Steel. Power. Hundreds of employees moved through the lobby with purpose. I suddenly became very aware of my modest navy dress and inexpensive shoes. The receptionist greeted me immediately. Miss Hayes, they are expecting you. That did not make me feel better. 5 minutes later, I stepped into a conference room overlooking the city skyline. The room was enormous. A polished walnut table dominated the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan like a painting. 3 executives sat waiting. Ethan sat at the far end. Relief washed through me the moment I saw him. At least one face in the room was familiar. Charlotte, he said warmly. Thank you for coming. I took the nearest seat. I am still not entirely sure why I am here. Several executives exchanged amused glances. Ethan slid a folder across the table. Because of this. I opened it. The first page displayed plans for the senior care initiative we had discussed outside the nursing home. The same project. The same proposal. Only now, sections were highlighted with handwritten notes. My notes. Or at least ideas based on our conversation. I looked up in confusion. What is this? A revised proposal. Ethan folded his hands. After our conversation, I asked the team to re-evaluate the project. One executive nodded. Your observations identified problems we had overlooked. Another added, several major changes have already been approved. I stared at them. You changed a multimillion-dollar project because of something I said in a parking lot? Ethan's expression remained perfectly calm. We changed it because you were right. For a moment, nobody spoke. My heart beat faster than it should have. Not because of the project. Because for the first time in my life, people like this were listening. Truly listening. Then the conference room door opened. Every head turned. Victoria entered without knocking. Her elegant smile appeared immediately. But when she saw me sitting at the executive table beside Ethan, something flickered across her face. Surprise. Then disbelief. Then something far colder. And in that moment, I realized this meeting was going to create far bigger problems than I ever imagined. The silence inside the conference room became almost uncomfortable. Victoria recovered quickly, but not quickly enough to hide the reaction I had already seen. Her smile returned with flawless precision as she walked toward the table. I hope I am not interrupting anything important, she said. One of the executives stood immediately. Not at all. Ethan's expression remained unreadable. We are almost finished. Victoria's eyes moved toward the proposal in front of me. Interesting. She took a seat beside Ethan without being invited. I did not realize employee consultations had become part of executive strategy meetings. The comment sounded harmless. Polite, even. Yet every person in the room understood exactly what she meant. Employee. Reminder. Boundary. I felt my face warm slightly but kept my expression neutral. Ethan did not react. Charlotte offered useful insight regarding the project, he said simply. Victoria nodded slowly. Of course she did. The meeting continued for another 15 minutes. Numbers. Budgets. Timelines. Most of it moved far beyond my expertise. Yet every time I spoke, someone listened. Every time I asked a question, executives took notes. It felt surreal. By the time the meeting ended, I was emotionally exhausted. As employees began leaving the room, I gathered my things and stood. Thank you for inviting me. Ethan rose as well. Actually, there is one more thing. My stomach tightened. He handed me another folder. This one was thinner. Simpler. What is this? An advisory contract. I stared at him. A what? Part-time consulting work for the foundation. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You cannot be serious. I am. I opened the folder. The compensation alone nearly made me drop it. The amount exceeded several months of my current salary. There must be some mistake. There is not. Ethan's voice remained calm. You understand the people we are trying to help. That has value. Before I could answer, Victoria stood abruptly. Ethan, may I speak with you? Her tone remained perfectly pleasant. Perfectly controlled. Yet something underneath it felt dangerously sharp. Ethan glanced toward her. One moment. Privately. The single word hung in the air. Every executive suddenly became fascinated by their documents. I closed the folder carefully. I should go. Ethan looked as though he wanted to say more. Instead, he nodded. Take the contract home. Think about it. I left the conference room with my heart racing. The elevator ride down felt endless. By the time I reached the lobby, my thoughts were completely tangled. Consulting contract. Foundation work. More money than I had ever imagined earning. None of it felt real. Outside, Manhattan buzzed with its usual energy. Yellow taxis. Street vendors. People rushing toward appointments. The city moved forward while I stood frozen on the sidewalk holding a folder that could change my life. Then my phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. I opened it. The message contained only one sentence. Be careful what you reach for, Charlotte. Some doors are meant to stay closed. I stopped walking immediately. The traffic noise seemed to fade around me. Slowly, I looked back up toward the towering Sterling Holdings building. Somewhere dozens of floors above, powerful people were making decisions. And for the first time, I began to wonder whether stepping into their world had been a terrible mistake. The text message stayed on my screen the entire drive home. I must have read it 20 times. The words never changed. Be careful what you reach for, Charlotte. Some doors are meant to stay closed. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the sun had disappeared behind the skyline. The city lights shimmered against the evening sky, but for the first time in weeks, I was not thinking about overdue bills or work schedules. I was thinking about that message. Someone wanted me intimidated. The question was why. My apartment was small. 1 bedroom. Worn hardwood floors. A kitchen barely large enough for 2 people. Normally it felt comforting. Tonight it felt unusually quiet. I placed the contract on the table and stared at it while heating leftover soup for dinner. Advisory Consultant. Sterling Foundation. The title looked absurd next to my name. I had spent years cleaning rooms and folding towels. Now one of the largest charitable organizations in the state wanted my input. It should have felt exciting. Instead it felt dangerous. My phone rang just after 8. Mrs. Harper's nurse. My heart jumped immediately. Is everything okay? I asked. Everything is fine, the nurse assured me. She simply wanted me to tell you something before she went to sleep. Relief flooded through me. What did she say? The nurse laughed softly. She said the tall gentleman should visit again because he listens better than most family members. Despite everything, I smiled. That sounds like her. After we hung up, I looked toward the contract again. Then something occurred to me. I opened my laptop and searched public records related to the Sterling Foundation Board. Article after article appeared. Donations. Awards. Expansion plans. Then another name kept appearing beside Ethan's. Victoria Langford. Her family's investment group held significant influence over several Sterling projects. Business partners. Social partners. Future family. The deeper I read, the clearer the picture became. This was not simply a relationship. It was an alliance. Suddenly her reaction during the meeting made far more sense. Around 10 o'clock, another email arrived. This one from Ethan directly. The message contained only 3 sentences. I hope I did not put you in an uncomfortable position today. Your perspective mattered. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. I read the email twice. Then a third time. No grand promises. No pressure. Just encouragement. Simple. Honest. Somehow that meant more than the contract itself. The following morning, I arrived at the estate earlier than usual. The mansion was still waking up. Staff moved quietly through hallways. Sunlight filtered across marble floors. For a few peaceful minutes, everything felt normal again. Then I entered the east wing and noticed something strange. 2 employees stopped talking the moment I approached. A third looked away quickly. The atmosphere felt different. Tense. Uncomfortable. As I continued working, the feeling followed me from room to room. People whispered. Conversation stopped when I entered. By lunchtime, I finally understood why. A folded newspaper sat on a staff breakroom table. Across the business section was a photograph taken outside Sterling Holdings headquarters. Ethan stood near the building entrance. I stood beside him holding the contract folder. The headline beneath the image was impossible to ignore. Billionaire heirs mystery advisor sparks questions inside Sterling Empire. The newspaper spread through the estate faster than any official announcement ever could. By the end of the afternoon, every employee had seen the photograph. Some offered quiet congratulations. Others avoided eye contact entirely. A few simply stared as if I had become someone else overnight. The strange thing was that I still felt exactly the same. I still folded linens. Still cleaned guest rooms. Still worried about bills and nursing home expenses. Yet somehow a single photograph had changed the way people looked at me. Around 3 o'clock, I was arranging fresh flowers in the west sitting room when Victoria appeared in the doorway. I noticed her reflection in the window before I turned around. Elegant as always. Perfectly composed. "Charlotte," she said pleasantly. "May I speak with you?" Every instinct told me this conversation would not be pleasant. Of course. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The room suddenly felt much smaller. "You have certainly become popular lately." Her smile never reached her eyes. "I did not ask for any publicity." "No," she said softly. "That is what makes it so effective." I set the flowers down carefully. "If there is something you want to say, I would prefer honesty." For a brief second, genuine surprise crossed her face. Then it disappeared. "Very well." She folded her arms. "Do you know how many people depend on the Sterling family business?" I remained silent. "Thousands. Employees. Investors. Charities. Entire communities." Her gaze sharpened. "Reputations matter. Stability matters." I understood immediately. "You think I am a threat to that?" "I think attention creates complications." The words were polite. The meaning was not. "I am a housekeeper," I replied quietly. "People will lose interest soon enough." "Perhaps." She took a step closer. "Or perhaps Ethan has already become more interested than he should be." The accusation hung in the air. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Not because she was entirely wrong. Because I had been trying very hard not to ask myself the same question. "You are mistaken," I said. Victoria studied me for several long seconds. Then, unexpectedly, her expression softened. "I actually believe you." That answer caught me off guard. "Then what is the problem?" "The problem," she said gently, "is that Ethan rarely notices anyone. When he does, things become complicated." Before I could respond, a knock interrupted us. Mr. Collins entered carrying a sealed envelope. "Miss Hayes." He handed it to me immediately. "This arrived from Sterling Holdings." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. I opened the envelope. Inside was a formal letter. My consulting contract had been approved. Effective immediately. The foundation wanted me to begin work the following week. I read the document twice to make certain I understood it correctly. When I looked up, Victoria was watching me carefully. "Congratulations," she said. The word sounded sincere. Somehow that made it even more unsettling. She turned and walked out without another comment. That evening, after my shift ended, I drove to the nursing home to share the news with Mrs. Harper. She listened patiently while I explained everything. The newspaper article. The contract. The attention. The uncertainty. When I finally finished, she smiled and squeezed my hand. People become uncomfortable when someone steps outside the box they built for them. I laughed softly. That sounds wise. It is old, she corrected. There is a difference. Then her expression grew thoughtful. Charlotte, do not spend so much time worrying about where you came from that you forget where you are capable of going. Later that night, as I left the nursing home, I found a black car waiting beside the curb. Ethan stepped out before I could reach my own vehicle. The moment I saw his expression, I knew something important had happened. We need to talk, he said quietly. The concern in Ethan's voice followed me before I even reached him. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the pavement, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked tired. Not physically tired. Burdened. Like someone carrying a decision he could not avoid any longer. You are starting to worry me, I said as I stopped beside him. Ethan exhaled slowly. Good. You should be worried. My stomach tightened immediately. That is not reassuring. He glanced toward the nursing home entrance before lowering his voice. The article was not an accident. I assumed that much. Someone arranged it. The city traffic hummed faintly in the distance. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question I already knew the answer to. Victoria? Ethan looked away. That was answer enough. I felt strangely calm. Disappointed, perhaps. But not surprised. Why? I asked. Because she thought it would embarrass you. And did it? I considered the question honestly. A little. Ethan shook his head. It was supposed to do more than that. His expression hardened. The article was meant to create pressure. To make you refuse the contract. I stared at him. That seems excessive. You do not know this world yet. The words were not arrogant. They were sad. People protect what they believe belongs to them. I thought about Victoria's warnings. The text message. The uncomfortable conversations. Suddenly the pieces fit together. She sees me as a threat. She sees change as a threat. Ethan corrected gently. There is a difference. The distinction mattered more than I expected. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small envelope. What is this? Open it. Inside was an invitation. Thick cream-colored paper. Elegant lettering. Sterling Foundation Annual Leadership Gala. 3 weeks away. Attendance by invitation only. I looked up. Why are you giving me this? Because I want you there. My heart skipped. As staff? As a guest? The answer landed harder than it should have. 3 months ago, I would have been serving drinks at that event. Now he was inviting me through the front entrance. Ethan. I laughed softly in disbelief. Do you have any idea what kind of attention that will create? Yes. And you still think it is a good idea? Yes. The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. I looked down at the invitation again. Gold lettering. My name printed beneath the foundation seal. For years, doors had closed before I could even approach them. Now one stood open. Yet somehow I felt more nervous than excited. I do not belong in rooms like that, I admitted quietly. Ethan's expression softened. Charlotte, that is exactly why you need to be there. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. A message from the nursing home administration. I opened it immediately. The words blurred for a second before coming into focus. A generous anonymous donation had just covered an entire year of Mrs. Harper's specialized care. My breath caught. What happened? Ethan asked. I looked up slowly. The amount was listed at the bottom of the message. The exact same amount as the consulting contract's annual compensation package. And somehow, deep down, I already knew who had arranged it. For a moment, I could not speak. The message remained glowing on my screen while the night air moved gently around us. An anonymous donation. Enough to guarantee Mrs. Harper's care for an entire year. The burden I had carried for months suddenly felt lighter. Almost unreal. I slowly lifted my eyes toward Ethan. He did not look surprised. He did not look proud. He simply looked at me with that same calm expression I had come to recognize. You did this, I said quietly. Ethan shook his head. The donation was anonymous. That is not a denial. A faint smile appeared. No, I laughed despite myself. Then something unexpected happened. My eyes filled with tears. Not because of the money. Not because of the contract. Because for the first time in a very long time, someone had seen the struggles I never talked about. The ones hidden behind polite smiles and long workdays. The ones nobody noticed because invisible people were expected to carry their burdens quietly. "Thank you," I whispered. Ethan looked away briefly toward the nursing home building. "You do not owe me thanks." "Yes, I do." No, his voice was gentle but firm. "The world has already taken enough credit for things you earned yourself." The words stayed with me long after that conversation ended. 3 weeks later, I stood beneath crystal chandeliers once again. The Sterling Foundation Leadership Gala was larger than any event I had ever attended. Cameras flashed. Reporters moved through the crowd. Executives and philanthropists filled the ballroom. But this time I was not carrying a tray. I was not arranging flowers. I was not standing quietly near the walls waiting to disappear. I had entered through the front doors. As a guest. As an advisor. As myself. The attention was overwhelming at first. Conversations paused when I entered. Curious glances followed me across the room. Yet something had changed inside me. For years I had measured my worth through other people's expectations. Their labels. Their assumptions. Tonight, those labels no longer seemed important. Across the ballroom, I noticed Victoria speaking with several board members. When our eyes met, she offered a small nod. Not warm. Not cold. Simply respectful. Somehow that felt like the closing of a chapter. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped onto the stage to deliver the foundation's annual address. The room fell silent immediately. He spoke about service. Community. Responsibility. Then he paused. "This year," he said, "our organization changed because someone reminded us that the people we help are more important than the buildings we build." Hundreds of guests listened. Ethan's gaze moved across the crowd until it found me. Wisdom does not always arrive from the places society expects. The ballroom remained perfectly quiet. Sometimes the most valuable perspective belongs to the person everyone overlooked. Heat rushed into my face. Yet for the first time in my life, I did not want to disappear. I wanted to stand there. To be seen. To accept it. When the applause finally filled the room, I understood something Mrs. Harper had tried to teach me years ago. A queen is not someone who sits on a throne. A queen is someone who never allows other people to define her value. People had spent years telling me who I was. A servant. A housekeeper. Someone meant to stay in the background. They were wrong. Not because a billionaire noticed me. Not because I entered a ballroom through the front doors. But because my worth had never depended on their permission in the first place.